From stories to tell your children, assuming you are a very bad parent, I will be reading a Thanksgiving treat, Good Science. Links in the description box below. Thank you for subscribing. Good Science. I'm going to call you Gobbles, and we're going to be gobbly-good friends. Gobbles seemed to take to the name as she pranced around her pen, repeating it loudly and proudly. Howie, come on inside, Mom called from the kitchen. Howie gave Gobbles a hug. Don't be scared, Gobbles. Once the family gets here, they'll see how beautiful and nice you are, and they won't want to eat you. Howie, Mom called from the kitchen. Be a good boy and help your mother get the house ready for the guests. Howie was a good boy, and he helped his mother get the house ready for the guests. Then Howie turned in for the night, but Howie couldn't sleep. Instead, he retrieved his flashlight from under the bed and slipped under the covers with his latest copy of Tales of the Incredible. Uncle Johnny was the first guest to arrive, 3 days before Thanksgiving. Let's have a look at that turkey, he said, immediately after setting his bags down and giving Mom, Pop, and Howie a hug. He was led to the back of the house where, from the window, there was a clear view of the pen. Oh, she's a beauty, all right. Howie smiled. I knew he would find her beautiful, too. Howie, be a good boy, said Mom, and go get your uncle a glass of water. Howie was a good boy, and he got his uncle a glass of water. What are those for? Asked Howie, pointing at the bottle of pills Uncle Johnny was struggling to open. The old ticker ain't what she used to be, I'm afraid, answered Uncle Johnny. And those pills can help? Yep. Uncle Johnny opened the bottle and poured 2 brown pills into the palm of his hand. Gets the old ticker ticking again. Howie, Mom said, go brush your teeth and wash up. It's bedtime. Howie made no fuss, and he was anxious to get under his covers and read the end of Tales of the Incredible. He was fascinated by the mad scientist who used large machines, wires, and electricity from the lightning storm to get the corpse to come alive. It would have been a whole lot easier if he had some ticker pills, but I suppose you make do with what you have. Good science is good science. Howie finished reading the comic book and went fast asleep, dreaming of lightning and scientists and corpses. Aunt Betty was the second of the Leichardts to arrive, 2 days before Thanksgiving. She wasn't so keen to see Gobbles. I don't need to see it prancing around in a pen, just happy to see it on my plate. But she isn't going to be on your plate, said Howie. Oh, no? Nope, responded Howie. This year, we're having chicken for Thanksgiving. Gobbles is part of the family now. Ain't that right, Mom? Mom turned to Pop. Why couldn't we have gotten a store-bought turkey like a normal family? Since when have we been a normal family? Said Pop. Then he turned to Howie. Now, why don't you be a good boy and go get your aunt a glass of water? Howie was a good boy, and he got his aunt a glass of water. When he returned, yellow triangle-shaped pills were spread out on the table before Aunt Betty. What are those for? Asked Howie. At my age, said Aunt Betty, my muscles and joints aren't what they used to be. And those pills can help. Gets the blood flowing and gets the old muscles and joints working right again. She popped 2 pills in her mouth and washed them down with a glass of water. But they're not for young boys, you hear me? Howie, Mom called from the kitchen, go brush your teeth and wash up. It's bedtime. Howie brushed his teeth and washed up and went to bed, wondering if the mad scientist had yellow triangle-shaped muscle pills, maybe his reanimated corpse would have been nimbler and been able to outrun those pesky villagers. Uncle Raymond and Aunt Mary were the last of the Leichardts to arrive, the day before Thanksgiving. Who are you? Asked a visibly upset Aunt Mary. And what are you doing in my living room? I'm your nephew, Howie. And this here's our living room. You're at our house, Aunt Mary, for Thanksgiving. Aunt Mary didn't look none too pleased with his answer, and Howie was confused. Mom pulled Howie aside. You're going to have to be patient with Aunt Mary. Her memory's not what it used to be. Now be a good boy and go get her a glass of water. So she can take pills for her ticker or for her muscles? Not exactly, dear. Aunt Mary takes pills for her. Mom tapped her head with her index finger. Howie was a good boy, and he got Aunt Mary a glass of water, but Howie was also a curious boy, and he stayed and watched Aunt Mary take her purple brain pills. For the pre-Thanksgiving dinner, announced Mom, I've prepared a chickpea soup. The Leichardts all sat around the table, all except Uncle Johnny Leichhardt. Where's Uncle Johnny? Asked Howie. Uncle Johnny's busy, replied Pop. Now, pass me the salt, son. Howie passed Pop the salt, but he was uneasy. He recognized the tone in Pop's Uncle Johnny's busy, something suspicious and secretive, like when he told Howie that Pickles had gone to a farm upstate. Suddenly his stomach tightened, it twisted and pulled, and his heart started beating fast. Howie stood up. I forgot to feed Gobbles. I'll be right back. Sit down, son, said Pop. And there was nothing suspicious or secretive about that command. All the Leichhardts ate their soup, all except Howie Leichhardt. What's the matter, sweetheart? Asked Mom. Don't you like the soup? No, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. That night, Howie didn't brush his teeth, and he didn't wash up before going to bed. He didn't retrieve his flashlight from under the bed, and he didn't read his copy of Tales of the Incredible. Instead, he shut his eyes and dreamt of a reanimated corpse lumbering around the house, scaring his family and punishing them for what they had done to Gobbles. But the corpse he dreamt of was nimbler, stronger, and much smarter than that of the mad scientist, because Howie had given it brown ticker pills and yellow triangle-shaped muscle pills and purple brain pills. Howie woke up before the sun. He woke up before the other Leichhardts. He tiptoed through the house, through the cold and through the dark. He crept up to the kitchen window to have a look at the pen. The empty pen. The gobbleless pen. The gobbles-less pen. Howie was sad and Howie was angry. He opened cupboard doors. He looked in the pantry. He even went outside into the cold November morning to have a look in the shed. What had they done with Gobbles? He returned to the kitchen, opened every door, and went through every drawer, even those too small to hide a turkey. When he closed the refrigerator and turned to peruse the room, all the furnishings faded into the background, all except the oven, whose sleek metal cast stood out from the wood countertops. How he trembled, his heart raced. He inched toward the stove, reached out with much apprehension, and just as he was about to place his hand on the door handle, "What are you doing up so early?" How he jumped and spun around to catch sight of a groggy, disheveled Uncle Johnny lumbering toward him. How he stumbled back, caught himself on the handle of the oven door, and tried to regain control over his breathing. "No peeking," said Uncle Johnny, motioning to the oven. "She'll be ready soon enough. You'll smell it." How he swallowed the lump in his throat and slid away from the oven. "Can't blame a young boy for being excited for Thanksgiving now, can we?" said Uncle Johnny. "Tell me, what's your favorite Thanksgiving dish? I bet it's pumpkin pie, isn't it?" Howie nodded. He tried to respond, but the words stayed stuck in his throat. Uncle Johnny walked up to him and reached out for him, his hand open and ready to grab. "Excuse me there." Howie jerked his head to the side, avoiding Uncle Johnny's hand by a split second. Uncle Johnny pulled the glass off the drying rack behind Howie and shuffled over to the sink. Howie stammered, I suppose I'd better get back to bed." "Nonsense, you're up. you might as well have breakfast with me. You set the table and take a seat. I just got to take my pills, then I'll pour us some cereal. Howie set the table and took a seat. Uncle Johnny fetched the newspaper from the front steps, joined Howie at the table, took his pills, and poured them some cereal. Howie ate while Uncle Johnny read the headlines out loud. When they had finished, they were joined by Aunt Betty. "If you'll excuse me," said Uncle Johnny as he stood from the table, "I do believe I have some work to do to prepare for the big feast." He dropped the newspaper on the table and picked up the 2 empty cereal bowls. "I'll clean up, Uncle Johnny." Uncle Johnny smiled. "Aren't you a good boy?" Uncle Johnny left the bowls. Uncle Johnny left the newspaper, and Uncle Johnny left his bottle of ticker pills and went to prepare for the big feast. Howie was a good boy. Howie served his Aunt Betty breakfast. He brought Aunt Betty a glass of water so that she could take her yellow triangle-shaped muscle pills, and Howie cleaned up. Aunt Mary and Uncle Raymond were late to rise. They said good morning to the others, then went straight to the living room to read. "Shall I bring you some tea and toast?" "Why, that's mighty kind of you," said Uncle Raymond. Howie was kind. And he brought Aunt Mary and Uncle Raymond some tea and toast, and he sat with them as they ate and drank, and Aunt Mary took her purple brain pills. "Aren't you such a good boy?" said Aunt Mary. And Howie was a good boy, and Howie cleaned up. Uncle Johnny had work to do to prepare for the big feast, and he helped Mom in the kitchen. Howie, too, had work to do, but he stayed down in the basement, away from the grown-ups. He left a few pills in each of the 3 pill bottles he cleaned up, but poured out the remainder onto the desk, then crushed them into a powder. The brown ticker pills, the yellow triangle-shaped muscle pills, and the purple brain pills. He added water, creating a yellowish-brown liquid, and filled the turkey baster with it. "Hang in there, Gobbles. A bit of good science, and we'll undo this mess." "Howie," Mom called from the kitchen, "be a good boy and come help your aunt set the table." Howie was a good boy, and he picked up the turkey baster he'd taken from the kitchen drawer, slipped it in the inside pocket of his vest, and went to help his aunt set the table. "Well, aren't you a handsome young man?" said Aunt Betty, "all dressed up for Thanksgiving dinner." Howie smiled. The Leichharts sat around the dining room table, and there were mashed potatoes and gravy and string beans and cranberry sauce. In the center of the table was Gobbles, head cut off, and set in a pan of yellowish-brown juice. Pop spoke. "Before I carve this beautiful bird, let's go around the table and say what we are each thankful for." He motioned to Mom on his right. "Honey, would you start us off?" Mom was thankful for family and friends. Uncle Johnny was thankful for the freedom he enjoyed in the country he loved. Aunt Betty was thankful for the peace she felt surrounded by the people she loved. Aunt Mary was thankful for such a caring husband, and Uncle Raymond was thankful for such a strong and resilient wife. Howie was thankful for the chance to see his favorite aunts and uncles. He was thankful for modern science, thankful it could provide Uncle Johnny with pills to make his ticker work, and pills to help Aunt Betty, and pills to help Aunt Mary. Howie was thankful for new beginnings and for friendships that could overcome adversity. He stared at Gobbles while he spoke, waiting for her to move, waiting for her to wake up. There was no lightning storm outside, but Howie was using good science, and he was certain good science didn't need lightning to work. Still, Gobbles wasn't moving. "But I gave her the good science juice nearly an hour ago. It should be working by now." Howie continued. He was thankful for the nice house he lived in and the nice clothes he could wear. He was thankful for his teachers, which he named individually. Still, Gobbles did not wake up. Finally, Howie ran out of things he was thankful for. Maybe it just takes a little time for good science to kick in. But Pop wouldn't wait any longer. He stood up, brandishing a large carving knife and a metal poker thing. He stabbed Goggles in the back, cut off pieces of her, and set them on the plates that were passed to him. While he served, Mom used a large spoon to scoop up some of that yellowish-brown juice to cover each slice. Howie filled his plate with green bean casserole and cranberries, and as Pop was carving another slice, Howie, out of the corner of his eye, thought he saw Goggles twitch. It's working! The good science juice is finally working. I'm so thankful, said a delighted Howie. But the other Leichhardts didn't give the juice the time to take effect. Delicious, said Uncle Johnny. Succulent, said Aunt Betty. Truly divine, said Aunt Mary. Devilishly good, countered Uncle Raymond. Howie wanted to shout, wait, 5 more minutes, please, she'll come back to life. Good science just needs a little more time to act. But instead, he sat silent, saddened, and frustrated as he watched his family fork down his feathered friend. I have to say there is a peculiar aftertaste to the turkey, said Pop, and his eye twitched. The juice has a bit of a bite, said Uncle Raymond with his shoulder in spasms. Did you use whiskey or another liqueur? Each Leichhardt, with one peculiar tick or another, made a comment on the strangeness of the taste and the strangeness of the color. But this did little to slow them down. In a matter of minutes, each Leichhardt had helped himself or herself to seconds and thirds, and all that remained of gobbles were a few bones marinating in a yellowish-brown juice. Uncle Johnny's shoulders spasmed, and he shot up, clutching his chest. I don't feel so good. Mom clutched her jaw to keep her teeth from grinding. With her other hand, she clawed at the tablecloth. Her fingers began to bleed, but she continued to claw, biting and licking her lips and pulling and scratching the skin on her neck. Aunt Betty took a knife and stabbed the green beans. They won't sit still, and she stabbed. They won't sit still, and she stabbed, and she stabbed. Aunt Mary clenched and unclenched the fist while her other hand clutched the blade of her knife, squeezing until a trail of blood ran down her arm to pool on the plate. Uncle Raymond stood and grabbed Uncle Johnny. You all right there? Where are your meds? Uncle Johnny patted each of his pockets in a panic. I don't know. I don't know what I've done with them. Everybody calm down. Pop's voice shook the room. He pounded his fist on the table, rattling the cutlery against the plates. Stop yelling. You're always yelling, Mom shouted. Pop pounded his fist. Uncle Johnny clutched his chest. Uncle Raymond put his hands in the cranberry sauce, scooped up a handful and threw it against the wall, then wiped his fingers on his face. Aunt Betty stabbed at the green beans. Aunt Mary released the knife she'd been squeezing and grabbed Aunt Betty by the wrist. Leave the green beans alone. They won't stop moving. Aunt Betty seized the knife by the blade. I said leave them alone. Mom grabbed Aunt Mary. Pop shouted. Uncle Raymond threw a bowl against the wall. Uncle Johnny grabbed Uncle Raymond, and Aunt Betty stabbed the green beans. There had always been family arguments at Thanksgiving dinner, but this was too much, even for the Leichhardts. Amidst the confusion, Howie collected the gobbles bones off everyone's plates, put them onto his plate, and backed away from the table. Aunt Mary wrestled with Aunt Betty, and Aunt Betty kept on stabbing. They won't stay still. A geyser of blood hit Uncle Raymond in the face. There was blood and stabbing and mashed potatoes and gravy. Aunt Mary threw herself onto Aunt Betty. There were insults and punches and cranberry sauce and pumpkin pie. Uncle Raymond threw a plate against the wall. Pop threw himself onto Uncle Raymond. Uncle Raymond stuck the metal poker thing in Pop's throat. You're always yelling, shouted Mom, and she stuck the carving knife in Aunt Mary's chest. There were knives stuck in necks and forks stuck in faces, cornbread and yams and pecan pie. Howie took the pan with the yellowish-brown juice off the table. Something else to be thankful for. Nobody had knocked over the pan and spilled his precious contents. He dumped the bones he collected into the pan. There were bodies on the table and bodies on the floor, and Gobble's bones piled in a pan. Howie looked at the bloody chaos around him and shook his head. It's going to take a whole lot of good science to undo this mess. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for watching and thank you for subscribing. I'll see you at the next video.